Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I am JJ Flazanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today's a solo show, and I wanted to talk about resistance. It's come up recently in a couple different ways, and I thought that sharing with you different levels of resistance, different factors that people have that we often don't really take into consideration. The first that comes to mind is first let's understand what resistance is based on law of attraction. And it doesn't even have to be law of attraction. You can just think of it as resistance in life, things you want to rebel against, things that upset you that you turn away from or ignore, things that stimulate feelings within you that then also potentially drive you to do things you would prefer not to do. Overeat, overdrink, overspend. All the ways we avoid our feelings, that's still wrapped up in some kind of resistance. So looking at how we think about life, how we think about things, our conscious mind makes up about 12% of our brain. And your conscious mind is when you can hear your own thoughts, when you can reflect on your thinking, when you're an observer of your thinking. These are all conscious thoughts. And again, they make up 12% of your mind. And a lot of times, many of us go into goal setting or wanting things in a way that leads us to just utilize and focus on our conscious brain. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just want to impart upon you that it's only 12% of your brain and your brain power and your mind and your consciousness. So if it's only 12%, how much power and control do we really have at that level? Well, we definitely have the point of focus. We have the ability to change what we focus on and to willingly tell ourselves a different story about something. But over and over again, time after time, people are manifesting things they don't want, which is great in one way because it's very clarifying. When you manifest what it is you don't want, it's an indicator that there's a belief system in the subconscious that you might not be aware of. So your subconscious mind is 88%. 88%, think of that iceberg. The iceberg that has a little bit of ice above the water, but is a massive behemoth structure underneath the water. That's your subconscious mind. And those ideas and beliefs have been put there from birth till about 8. And then over the course of time with any traumatic events that have happened, that your brain and your reptilian brain have deemed as something dangerous, something that you need to flee from, some kind of flight or fight response, something that your body now puts away in its cells as danger. So we have these traumatic experiences and these beliefs, and sometimes, obviously, your subconscious mind is obviously all of the time assessing things and making determinations that your conscious mind may have no idea about. So far, we've dealt with the conscious mind. That's your thoughts that you're thinking right now, the things that you recognize you are thinking, the beliefs you know you have, and then we've got the 88% underneath of the things that you aren't possibly aware of. Now, sometimes you can know what's under there. One of the great therapies that I love is hypnosis, and there's a couple different ways to use hypnosis. Hypnosis can be used to just start reprogramming the mind, and I've done that the most, where you're being led down into the subconscious mind by relaxing the conscious brain, and usually with a therapist of some kind or an audio CD of some kind. And you go through this process of relaxing into a very, very deep state where your subconscious is more accessible. And then you're reprogramming it by the way of the stories, the visualizations, the affirmations, the beliefs that we're reinforcing in the subconscious mind. So that way we're just going in and rewriting the story. So other influences that you may not realize that you have going for you is in your subconscious mind when you're sleeping at night, or let's say you fall asleep to the television, or there's news on, or there's angry music on, or hatred music, or you've just read something that's very fearful and gets your mind going, and then you go to sleep at night. Your subconscious brain, especially when there's sounds and frequencies outside of you that can be absorbed in you during slumber, that's when your subconscious mind is really susceptible for programming. I had a client once who had huge anxiety and worry and control issues, and she'd go to bed with the news on, or with the reports of the money, or the reports of what's going on overseas, or politics. And I thought to myself, turn that off. That is terrible. You are like feeding your subconscious with all this fear energy all night long. So one of the things I love to suggest to people is if you do any kind of hypnosis, that you always record it and that you listen to it while you sleep. The audios that I've created on the Manifestation Starter Kit, all of Lisa Thomas's audios, can be done while you're sleeping, which is then going in and reprogramming your subconscious mind. But something to pay attention to when you're not using a different tool to just start reprogramming your mind is to really start to uncover patterns and behaviors and beliefs that are showing up in your life that are showing you what you believe. I think one of the most powerful tools to be aware, learn to be an observer of your thoughts and your feelings and of the story that you're telling yourself and what you think that means. You know, I've done a show. I keep threatening to do it again. Of course I will. I do it on my live events, which is why I never put it back here. It's the work of Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. It's nonviolent communication. It's the 3 steps to effective communication. It is episode 118 on the Fit to Love podcast, and it is still the number one body of work that I use with every client over time to start to assess what your needs are. Here's a phrase I want you to remember after I sear it into your brain. Any negative emotion that you have is because you have a need that's not being met. Now, it could be a perceived not being met need, which to you is the same thing in your brain. But understanding that if I'm having a negative thought or feeling, I am perceiving that I have a need that's not being met. And we can use our conscious brain to uncover what that is. So one way to release some resistance is to actually problem solve your resistance. And sometimes, for those of you that aren't very structured or not very left-brained, you're very right-brained, you have resistance to that. You think it's not feeling enough. And I get that. I understand that. But sometimes it's necessary, especially if you're a right-brainer, to stop telling the stories that consume you, that create this emotion. Now, on the flip side, you can also get caught up not expressing the feeling and then keeping some of that energy alive within you. So again, those left brainers, while you may be structured and analytical, aren't necessarily expressive. So even though your head has gotten in the way to make sense of it, your body has not been given the chance to release it. So we have to marry those two together. Now, the right brainers, you guys are really great at releasing it momentarily, but your head and your brain keep telling the same story over and over again, which gets you right back to where you were before in generating all these negative feelings or fears about some need that's not being met. So we need the balance of both. So for those of you that have been listening for a while, you know that I do some events, 2 to 3 a year. And at every single event, pretty much, I have had Lisa Thomas as one of my event superstars, so to speak, right? Because Lisa clears inherited emotional DNA. So that's another layer on top of the conscious brain and the subconscious brain, and some of the things in your subconscious mind energetically have been passed down to you generation after generation after generation, and you didn't even have a conscious choice. It's an energetic set point, so to speak, that you were born into, that you energetically came into, and that frequency overloaded your system and had meta tags on your energies and on your meridians. In order for you to remember things, respond to things, you sort of got programmed in ways that you may not like now. And so we have that next layer of inherited emotional DNA of things that we can clear. And of course, you can do that by coming to one of the live events like the Manifestation Bootcamp in October, or working with Lisa one-on-one. I will tell you that a one-on-one session with her is not much less than coming to the whole weekend for the Manifestation Bootcamp. And one of the things, as I've been telling you since the beginning here, is that we have to marry the two together. So unless you're a very balanced brain and you are practicing both sides of this, we can't just do one or the other. We have to do both. In order to release resistance on all levels, conscious, subconscious, inherited emotional DNA, and then even energetic within your soul contract, the reason why you came down here, I'm going to call it astrological, accepting certain ideas and energies about why you're here and what you're here to learn, and understanding how you check yourself out or hold yourself apart from due to fear of trusting, the fear of the unknown, the fear of believing something different. A lot of us use our negative beliefs to keep us right where we are. Our body and our brains want to keep us in homeostasis. We are afraid of change most of the time, which is one of the reasons why for me in this move has been really shifting for me, because Lisa even said it to me in a session that we had recently. She's like, I don't know anyone more willing to change than you and wanting change. So this brought up a very deep fear and I'd say a resistance that I have about being told what I have to do that affects me on levels that other people seemingly can control. But see, that's the story that I was telling myself in order to keep myself in anger because I wanted to be mad at somebody. But the reality of it is I attracted this, right? And there's a bigger reason for this. Moving into a new space, while temporary, and while it was going to be temporary here, we were only going to be here in this space for another year to 18 months anyway. But being here, being comfortable, paying under market value, having all the luxuries and the things that I'm used to here might have kept me lazy, might have kept me from really truly paying more attention to saving money and to putting money away for a down payment on a house that I would like to buy within the next 12 months. And so besides the fact that now I'm on a countdown in my mind to get the heck out after 12 months and to be purchasing my dream home, it's also the energetic support of my relationship. You know, the universe gave me a year to transition slowly with Doug in my safe space. And now the safe space is in my relationship, and we are going to go create new energy somewhere else. And yes, I still love this place, and yes, I'm still sad. But when I remind myself and trust that I've asked for this on some level, then I release resistance and I can get excited about it. So other things that get in the way that cause resistance, well, obviously your core wounds, whatever they are. And I've worked with a bunch of you recently who've done the starter pack, my 2-session starter pack. When we're looking at healing, one of the things besides astrology that I'm going to look at in you is whether or not you've done some of the imago work, some of the childhood wounds, because all of your relationships, even the career choice that you've made. For instance, when I went to Al-Anon years ago, I learned quickly that a lot of nurses become nurses because their fathers were alcoholics. And I don't know if that speaks to you or not. Maybe you're in a profession that's similar to nurses. And it really roots back to wanting to save your father or save your mother or save somebody. And being able to save other people can help you live out that guilt or shame or fear or sadness that you have for not being able to save, let's say, your father or your mother. Now, that is not everyone across the board, but it is a very, very common occurrence. So when we look at your childhood wounds and what happened to you and the things you didn't get that you needed the most, these 5 or 6, and there might be more, play out throughout your entire life. So when we're looking at what to heal, I'd like to go backwards a little bit just to see some of those things, because now we're shaping up a story about how you see the world. So maybe you don't know how you see the world because you're just in it. But when we can go back and look at what happened to you and what you didn't get, and now it makes sense in the present why you react the way you do, why you sabotage yourself, why you resist certain things. We learn a lot from just looking at some of these deep core wounds. If you aren't aware of what they are, what you didn't get from your parents that you longed for, it's a valuable exercise. That is the Creating Your Imago exercise in the Getting the Love That You Want workbook, or you can read the Getting the Love That You Want book. Now, something else that also creates resistance is criticism and shutting down. One of the ways that we block our intuition and that we block our ability to trust is by criticizing or saying no. You know, it's funny, back years ago when I was really overloading myself with a lot of Abraham, it really became about, there was a political story. And I know people here are somewhat political, somewhat not. I never talk about it, but let's just use politics as an example. The more that you hate a certain politician or a policy or a belief system, and the more you push against it, you actually support them energetically getting what they want. So it's about not saying no to things. It's about saying yes to other things. I hope that makes sense. When you find yourself criticizing somebody else, when you find yourself getting upset and angry about something and finding the faults in it, basically speaking, you are disconnecting from who you really are, who sees the picture differently, from a place of love. Because remember, there's only really two places we're coming from, love or fear. So if you're in fear, you're not in love. How do we get you to jump from fear to love? How do we trust? How do we change the story? How do we focus on the solution to the problem? How do we focus on what you really want? Not what is, but what you really want, to translate and transfer from fear into love, into hope, into excitement, into passion, into freedom. And, that's another aspect to what people... when you have resistance that's so high to something, we have to examine how it's taking your freedom away from you. I'm aware that my freedom is my number one thing. And that's, again, why I have had a hard time with this move, because it wasn't my choice on this earthly plane. I was told that I had to, right? So to me, the appearance of not being free has been what has been the most upsetting. But of course, it's an illusion, because we all know we're the creator of our own reality. So I knew it was coming. I wanted certain things out of my life and relationship, and this is how it has to happen in order for me to get those things. And along the way, every time we cross a new edge, listen up, every time you get to that new comfort level or the edge of your current comfort level, there literally needs to be a new belief system or a cleaned up belief system in order for you to cross that and expand that comfort zone even wider. I didn't realize it in my relationship until I had moved on to the next relationship, that how much someone else's secret disbelief in me created resistance and fear within me. Made me question what I could or couldn't do, because the world that some people live in, there's very finite ways to make money, have a business, manifest things. And when I opened up to a new possibility with someone else who had very different belief systems, I didn't realize how my own belief systems would change. Even just financially on one level. When Doug and I first got together, we got a contract. He got the contract, and he asked me if I wanted to join with him. And he gave me the number, the financial number, which he was quoting them, and I increased it. And then it got increased 2 more times until we had our contract finished. And to date, it's still the highest contract he and I have ever made together or separately. Recently, I was asked to perform one of my skill sets within the company. And being that cash flow and time right now in this red hot moment are the most important things to me, I declined being a part of, let's say, a deal that would kind of cut me into the deal long term because I can't work on other people's stuff right now if it's not my own, or if it's not connected to me directly, or if it doesn't bring in cash flow for my own investments, right? So I have to stay true to what my needs are right now and all the things I want to complete within my own business. And so giving my energy away to someone else isn't feasible for me unless I'm being compensated for it. And I actually had quoted a number based on other numbers, and it's probably the highest number I've ever quoted. Doesn't mean I'm going to get it, and I'm okay if I don't. But the point is that I've expanded my comfort zone to even ask for it. And that's where people, everyone starts out, if you're a solopreneur or a business owner, there are certain times where you quote your services or your pricing, and then you see there's a need for you to go up. Maybe you're overbooked. Maybe you have too many patients or clients. Maybe your services change. And even the most expensive people who I work with, their sessions still go up. I know one woman who teaches financial abundance, and she gives herself a raise every year. So, it's amazing because it's like literally stretching yourself into a new belief system, which is directly correlates with your self-worth. So we need to look at the places in which you're telling a story that brings up criticism, that brings up a lack of love, that brings up a disconnection from seeing it from a more holistic way with love in your heart. And if you find yourself doing that, then obviously trying to change the story, giving yourself some depth and perspective, and if you're a man, I don't mean to oversimplify, but sometimes you guys just want to know if it's good or bad. And some women do it too. Does it go into this category or that category? Is it healthy or unhealthy? Is it good or bad? Is it right or is it wrong? And guys and women, it's not always that simple. Because if you put a lot of things in the negative category, you're going to be pretty frustrated about some things, that the topics and subjects that you decided are bad. If we can look at something and say it's unwanted, the energy of unwanted is different than it's bad. And again, each circumstance is going to bring up different ideas for different scenarios. Another factor, of course, that can cause resistance that I've talked about before is astrology. I can obviously not give you an overview right now because it's more personalized than that, but just generally, there are astrological reasons why some people have more resistance than others. Across the board, you earth signs could possibly, again, I don't want to overgeneralize, have more resistance than others. Why? Because you're Earth. Earth doesn't move. Well, it did move quite a lot recently here in California with our 2 earthquakes, but generally Earth doesn't move. It's pretty unmoving. So what does that mean for your belief systems or your habits or your patterns? It means that you're stubborn and you don't normally move until you manifest a reason for the Earth to shake, okay? Now, that doesn't mean across the board all of you are like that, because your ascendant and your Venus and your Mars and your Mercury and your moon are all going to color that. So don't take that so seriously, but know that you are predispositioned energetically by your astrological chart. So learning to work with it. I think I've told the story here before that I dated somebody who, it frustrated me to no end that he wouldn't commit or not commit. We'd broken up and gotten back together, but he wouldn't tell me if we were back together or not. And I, for months, could not get off the soapbox of just tell me. Because to me, there was a way to behave if you're together and a way to behave if you're not. And I just wanted to know which lane to be in. And I got so frustrated at myself thinking, you're not normally like this. What's your deal? I did my chart. I saw that I had an Aries in my Venus. So I got very clear as to why I was impatient, and then I worked with it. And as I worked with it, it got better, and I relieved that habit and that pattern because I was conscious of it. So when it comes to releasing resistance, most of it's going to come down to some of those subconscious beliefs that you do or don't know that you have, not truly understanding what your needs are. So please go listen to episode 118 on the Fit to Love podcast, season 1. And if you need to download the feelings and needs list, it's on fittolove.tv. Again, that's fittolove.tv. Or you can email me and I'll send it to you. And then looking at what story that you're telling yourself. That is conscious mind. But what can you do to release some of that? What's the true fear that's keeping you stuck? Why are you not taking action into the thing that you said that you want? Are you really just afraid or don't believe in yourself? Are we focused on what is, or are you focused on what you want? Basic law of attraction. If you're focused on what is, you're going to bring up all the feelings about what is, and you will keep repeating what is. If you're focused on what you want, you're going to release some of that resistance, because the more you focus on what you want, the more you visualize about it, the more you believe it. When you believe it and you know it, you release resistance around anything else that's going on in your path, because you know it's temporary and it's going to leave. Before I recorded today's show, I asked a few questions on Facebook about some resistance questions that I'll get to in a minute. Before I do that, I pulled a tarot card from my deck, and it's the Princess of Wands. And when I was shuffling the deck, I said, whatever I need to know about whatever you want me to know about. I'm just pulling one. So the keywords for this are the earthy aspect of fire, being freed from fear, new beginning, optimism, and increased perception. The fear is conquered. The Princess of Wands, naked, open, unprotected, has vanquished the tiger of fear. Her staff bears a symbol of the sun. The feathers on her head indicate her increased perception and sense of justice, which she has gained by overcoming her fear. She dances her ecstatic dance in a huge flame. Beside her, on an altar ornamented with ram's heads, the fire of spring, new beginnings, burns high. The fiery red background symbolizes passion, vitality, and flaming energy. When fear disappears, undreamed of springs of enthusiasm and joy bubble up, revitalizing our lives. Our self-limiting fears, the tiger's corpse, can be buried and forgotten. Indications. Your old fears have lost their power over you. Their dead remains cannot frighten you any longer. Reflect now on your greatest strengths. Question. What is the next step in your life? Find it fearlessly. Suggestion. Learn about ways of transforming fearful feelings. Get involved, for example, in dance, trance work, or ecstatic forms of meditation. Affirmation. My greatest strength is, as I accept my fear, it is transformed into love. I thought that was very appropriate for today's show and for me. And one of the things that you can get involved in, of course, is coming to the Manifestation Boot Camp. We are doing it October 11th through the 13th. Now, I've mentioned all the ways in which we're going to deal with different levels of resistance. But one of the things you're going to get is also the release of blocks that Lisa gets to pick up on that are included in your inherited emotional DNA, that possibly could be included in your soul contract. But coming to the place where you're actually going to be energetically cleared of these things is so powerful and transformative. That alone is worth the price of the ticket. Not even all the stuff I'm going to do with you, but the stuff I'm going to do with you is going to be as effective. So the two combined, like I've said before, because I've worked with lots of people with Lisa, and it's not a one thing or the other. It's not just do the conscious work or just do the healing work. You need both. They have to be married together to make true progress, because if they're not, then you're relying on something outside of yourself and giving your own power away. We have to understand our conscious mind. We have to know how to take our power back and to identify our needs, and more importantly, to get them met, and to know and trust in ourselves that we can get them met. So if you're interested in coming, it will sell out. There's limited seats. Go to jjflizanes.com/bootcamp. Again, that's jjflizanes.com/bootcamp, and there is a payment plan in place. Now, to get to some of the questions, I'm not going to read them all, and I'm not going to give you guys, I'm not going to out you. You know who you are, and I will answer these in different podcasts because I had enough to say myself today that I didn't want to go too long. So I've got one that says, I have resistance around moving on, leaving my 30-year toxic marriage. In other areas, I feel free. However, codependence, verbal abuse, and in past, at time physical, I don't feel emotionally connected anymore. I just worry about him and how sad he will be. Feel responsible, guilty somehow for his happiness, even though I know I'm not, but that's how I feel. So, I'm not going to mention your name, but I'm sure you're not alone in this. In fact, I was told by a medical intuitive that I needed to read a book about codependence and start talking about balance on the show because it was a calling and a sacred covenant that I had. So I find this conversation and topic very intriguing. Anytime we are with someone who has a substance abuse, it is often to reflect that we, the person who's with them, the codependent person, also has an addiction. It's not substance abuse, though. Most of the time, it's control. And when we look at our spouse or friend or qualifier, whoever they are in our lives, and we tell ourselves that they're making a mistake, that they don't know what they're doing, that how could they be doing this, and we blame them for the choices that they're making. Again, we create resistance because we're not feeling into the compassion of the real reason they're doing this in the first place. Anyone with a substance abuse is trying very hard not to feel something. So the question you want to ask yourself, what are they running away from? What is so painful that they're unable to sit with themselves without numbing themselves? And for you, what is so painful? What is the fear that drives my need to control them? And in some cases, what is my fear about my own self-worth, that this is something that's acceptable and okay for me? I stayed in a relationship for over a year and a half that wasn't anywhere near working or good for me. But I also had the story that there was transition happening and that there was a age crisis happening and a midlife crisis, so to speak. And that eventually maybe the anger would wear off and someone would have sort of an enlightenment. And if I did my work enough, I would evoke better feelings and thoughts. And some of that did come true. But for me, there was a point in time, and mine was more about my commitment to my commitment than it was to, and the fear of, well, what does that mean about me? That one day I just allowed myself to trust, because I had been pushed too far emotionally, that my inner being said, you deserve better than this. And someone's telling you they don't want to be with you. So why not just accept it? Why are you fighting so hard? They're saying they don't want to be with you. So I accepted it. And I said, yeah, okay. I know that I deserve to be with someone who wants to be with me. That's pretty clear and it's pretty easy. And I don't want to stay in this any longer. And I was hoping that person would be you. But at this point, I was surrendering. So you have to ask yourself, in the situation of being in a toxic marriage situation, where are the places that you're not loving yourself, that you're unwilling to take the stance to love yourself? What are the beliefs that drive staying in a situation that you know in your mind it isn't good for you? What are some of the habits and patterns? What's some of the inherited emotional DNA? What are the patterns of your parents? There's lots of questions to ask. The first thing I would recommend you dig into would be to possibly go back and do some of that imago work. But to ask yourself, what are your real needs and why is it that you aren't taking them? You know, one of the things that's coming up for me when I'm reading this is a lot of us feel, again, on this control factor, that we're responsible for other people. And I did it. I did it for sure, because I deemed myself as knowing more. I deemed myself as understanding the situation on a deeper level and being able to see fears and wounds. And while that may be true, I can't control someone else's inner being. And when we don't allow others to show up as they want to show up, and we try to convince them that they're different than they are, and we try to make them be something that they're not, there's going to be resistance on both ends. When you work on yourself and when you clear your own wounds, when you heal your own wounds, and you're happy with yourself, it's a lot easier to allow others to suffer their own consequences of their bad choices and of their past wounds that they're unwilling to deal with. It doesn't mean you don't become sad. It doesn't mean you don't have remorse. It doesn't mean you don't care. It just means you understand that they have a path and a journey that they have chosen and that they're sticking to. And all you have to do is be lovingly compassionate but disconnected. Let people know that you're there for them and that you love them, but allow them to suffer their own consequences. I think some of you have heard I have several clients that I've worked with for a very long time as their trainer. And finally, after 8 years, one of them has stepped into more consciousness and accepting the connection between the depth of emotions and the pain, and has now finally found some relief and awareness that wasn't there before. But it took 8 years. When I first started working with him, I identified his back pain as repressed anger and repressed rage. And because it was such a new concept, I was sort of laughed at in a nice way, in a, oh, you silly girl kind of way. And through the years, there's been all kinds of things that have happened on a physical level. And 8 years later, it took manifesting a condition that forced him to maybe say, well, maybe there's something to this. And then I reintroduced the concepts and the teachings of Dr. John Sarno again in a podcast I did years and years and years ago. And now he was ready to listen and to try it 8 years later. Now I have some clients who've never changed their behavior, people who are very committed to their story. Some people's pain actually prevents them from growing because they're too afraid of letting go of the get out of jail free card that their pain allows them to have. See, sometimes pain and disease can be your excuse to get love and attention. And I know you don't mean that on a conscious level, because some people might not seriously, some people might say, well, why would I want to have this? But subconsciously, your body and your brain know that when you're in pain or suffering, you might have people around you that attend to you, and you like that. You know they care. You feel their love for you. So you have assessed and connected a belief that says, I get love when I'm suffering. I get love when I'm in pain. I get attention, or I get left alone, or I can do things that I normally can't ask for, and no one's going to yell at me or argue with me about it. So we have to really assess sometimes why we hold on to some of the habits and patterns and beliefs that we do, because they protect us from something else. And there are times where some people are never going to change. They're unwilling because the fear of, well, what if it doesn't work? What if the other thing that you're asking me to do doesn't work as well as this thing? This thing I can live with. I can live with back pain for the rest of my life. I know how to do that. But what I don't know how to do is to stand up for myself, to allow someone else to yell at me and be detached, to allow someone else to be frustrated and to send them love and to not get involved because it triggers my own wounds that I'm unwilling to look at. So, of course, this topic goes way deeper than this podcast is going to hit. So this is the start of the conversation about resistance. But I just wanted to give you an overview of some of the reasons why you do what you do and all the different levels and layers from conscious to subconscious to inherited emotional patterns and belief systems to our soul contracts. And I definitely feel like the team I surround myself with and the body of work that I utilize with all my tools is sometimes some of the best ways to quickly uncover what some of these things are and to give you a method in order to overcome it, or at least identify it, so that you can make a choice about when you're ready to deal with it. Maybe you're not ready today. Maybe it might take 8 years. But at least understanding it will give you a sense of power and empowerment that you know what it is. And maybe you'll decide later. So I hope you'll consider coming to the Manifestation Bootcamp, again, October 11th through the 13th in Los Angeles. It starts Friday night. It ends Sunday afternoon. It will be an amazing event, and I promise you that you will, at least, if nothing else, because Lisa is amazing, you will be removing blocks that get in your way. And because we're all coming together under this umbrella of manifestation, we're going to be picking up on some of the deepest, most common fears and blocks people have, whether it be around shame, fear of success, things that block money. We're going to deal with money first. We're going to deal with relationships second, and then health and wellness third. So that's the order in which the focus is going to be placed on the content and all the tools that I'm going to be giving you. There will be a in-person clearing every day with Lisa. There will be other tools. Again, I'm not going to give it all away, but I'm just letting you know we're going to be focused on money, focused on relationships, and focused on health. We're going to get a lot done, and you're going to come away feeling released and vibrating very, very high, and with a new sense of a expanded comfort zone and new levels and new heights of where you can see your life going. So that way we can actually believe it and therefore attract it. So go to jjflizanes.com/bootcamp, and I look forward to seeing you there.